Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone joining us from around the world for our 2 days of seminar programming. I'm Carol White, the President and Executive Director here at the Corning Museum of Glass in Corning, New York. It is my pleasure to welcome each of you to the museum's 62nd annual Seminar on Glass, a source of immense institutional pride as we celebrate the legacy of more than 6 decades of scholarly presentation in this unique forum. The annual seminar has been hosted online since 2021, when the pandemic forced us to pivot to a virtual format. However, this move has brought unexpected positive consequences. Not only are we able to bring global experts together, but this year alone, we have had over 600 registrants from around the world, advancing our goals to support scholarship and disseminate glass knowledge. I begin my remarks with the acknowledgement that the Corning Museum of Glass is located upon the unceded seized territory of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, of which the Onondaga, the Seneca Nation, and the Gayukokono, the Cayuga Nation, are a part. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy precedes the establishment of the museum, New York State, and the United States of America. The museum acknowledges the oppressive history inflicted upon and the continued dispossession of the Haudenosaunee people. We honor their ongoing connection to these lands and waters. We ask all who hear this acknowledgement to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that connect us all. Today, we embark upon a vibrant and thought-provoking set of presentations centering on the history of glass as a vessel for scent, and on the use of smell in museum exhibitions and art installations. This year's seminar was inspired by the special exhibition Sensorium, Stories of Glass and Fragrance, which is on view at the Corning Museum of Glass until February 1st, 2025. Over the next 2 days, we will hear from scholars, curators, perfumers, and artists, joining us virtually from all over the United States, as well as Ireland, France, Italy, and Australia. From the beginnings of glassmaking, glass vessels were created to hold and diffuse fragrance, and designers still use glass today to house luxurious perfumes. The histories of glass and scent have been intertwined for centuries, and over the course of the program, we hope to foster conversation between the glass and perfume worlds, with presenters exploring the sensory functions of glass vessels, as well as the broader cultural histories of scented materials. By incorporating presentations by experts in adjacent fields of study, this seminar program demonstrates today's integrated approach to interdisciplinary research and multi-sensory interpretation strategies. On September 7th, Sensorium, Stories of Glass and Fragrance, opened to the public. The exhibition is presented in an intimate setting where visitors can view historical and modern glass objects related to scent, including perfume bottles by leading modern designers and contemporary artists. The featured objects take visitors around the world, from Venice to Batavia, Bohemia to Beijing, Paris to Mexico City. Each object was selected for the unique stories it tells about human olfaction and its manifestations in the material world. Together, the objects showcase the history of perfume bottles, the role of scent in disseminating novel glassmaking techniques, and the importance of glass tools and equipment to the development of perfume. In the gallery space, visitors are invited to try a smell experience featuring 4 distinct fragrances of spices that early modern Dutch merchants sourced from Indonesia, India, and Sri Lanka. This experience is inspired by a set of 4 gilded and enameled flasks that would have contained precious spiced oils gifted by the Dutch to their diplomatic allies around the Indian Ocean. Later today, at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time, we will feature a pre-recorded tour of the exhibition by curator Julie Belmar. We are grateful for the contributions of our lending partner, Lalique SA, in addition to Daniel and Wilmot von Kamen, other exhibition supporters, and our internal teams. I would like to take a minute to inform our participants and audience members about 2 funding opportunities for glass research offered by the Corning Museum of Glass. The RACAL Grant for Glass Research is awarded annually to research projects that expand the field of glass studies and produce publicly available research outcomes. These projects can be carried out anywhere in the world. By contrast, the David Whitehouse Residency for Scholars seeks to bring researchers to Corning to engage with the museum's resources, notably the extensive holdings of the RACAL Research Library. Information on how to apply is available through our website and will be linked in the chat. Applications for the RACAL Grant for Glass Research are currently open, and we encourage you to apply. These funding opportunities and our ability to present our annual seminar program for free to a global audience exists due to the generosity of current and past museum donors. I hope that if you are inspired by our programs and exhibitions, that you consider becoming a museum member or making a gift to support our mission to inspire all to see glass in a new light. I now welcome the Sensorium Exhibition Curator, Julie Belmar, who will say a few words about the seminar program.
Thank you very much, Carol. I will now share a brief preview of the next 2 days of seminar programming. Our keynote speaker, Dr. Jessica Murphy, works at the Brooklyn Museum, where she's created scent gallery tours on a variety of topics. Her keynote lecture, which will take place tomorrow at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, will take a close look at 20th century perfume bottles shaped like birds and beasts, connecting their stories and symbolism with related developments in fashion, the fine arts, and visual culture. This morning, we will have the pleasure of exploring the role of glass perfume vessels in the ancient Mediterranean and Islamic worlds, with papers on perfumers as glass patrons, the roles of pleasant scents in Islam, using glass as evidence of perfume practices, and the linked sensory experience of glass and perfume in the ancient world. And then, inspired by our own scent experience in the exhibition, the afternoon session will foster discussion between 2 curators and a perfumer who have found new ways to integrate smell in museum settings. Tomorrow morning, our 3rd session will bring us into the early modern period with papers on scent and medicine at European courts, on rosewater vessels in Venice, on the use of glass equipment in the production of perfume, and on René Lalicque's modern perfume bottle designs. And finally, an afternoon panel will invite perspectives from 3 artists who incorporate scent as a key component of their sculptural and installation practice, 2 of whom work specifically with glass and scent. Throughout the program, you can place any questions for our speakers in the Q&A feature, and you may use the chat feature to interact with other participants. Our technical support team is available to you as well. You may contact them at avuser@cmog.org or by using the chat feature in the seminar lobby. So, without further ado, I will hand the mic to my colleague, Catherine Larson, Curator of Ancient Glass, who will host our first session. Thank you.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm really honored to be here to introduce our first session of the 62nd annual seminar on glass of the Corning Museum of Glass. As Julie just indicated, my name is Catherine Larson, and I'm the museum's curator of ancient glass and manager of curatorial affairs. As you've just heard, this year's seminar is focused on our special exhibition, Sensorium, Stories of Glass and Fragrance, which is open from now until February 1st, 2025. The theme of the session this morning, or afternoon or evening, depending on where you are in the world, is glass and fragrance in the ancient Mediterranean and Islamic worlds. So just a reminder that you can place any questions for our speakers in the Q&A feature, and we'll be watching that and have time for Q&A at the end of each of our talks this morning. And then you may also use the chat feature to interact with the other participants or contact our technical support team, as well as through avuser@cmog.org. We'll have about 5 minutes after each presentation for questions. And just a final reminder that the Corning Museum of Glass does not tolerate hate speech of any kind. And we ask that you please keep the comment section respectful and supportive. So I'm pleased this morning to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Stefano Carboni. Dr. Carboni was the CEO of the Museums Commission in the Ministry of Culture of Saudi Arabia, Director and CEO of the Art Gallery of Western Australia, and curator and administrator in the Department of Islamic Art at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. A native of Venice and a specialist in Islamic art and museum strategies and leadership, his research, lectures, and publications span several areas of Islamic art with a particular emphasis on glass studies. Welcome, Stefano.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kate. That's wonderful to be here. I'm actually speaking from Perth in Western Australia, so here it's a very different time zone. And thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. So my talk is really about trying to identify these glass vessels in the Islamic world and during the Islamic period that are in some way connected, or we believe are connected with the topic of the exhibition, with scent, with perfume, with rose water. And the title of the talk is related to the sūq al-cattārīn, which can be translated as the spice market today. But the cattārīn are those who used to make perfume, and attar, as you may know, is also the rose oil. And so the smell, the scent is something that is definitely very much related to the sūq al-cattārīn, which you find everywhere in the Islamic world. So I'm trying to move the slides, which doesn't seem it's happening. I don't know if someone can take control of the slides. Okay, great, thank you. So I will ask you to turn. So first of all, I wanted to point out that in the captions that you see, those that are highlighted in green are objects that are actually in the exhibition, in the scent exhibition, in the sensorium exhibition that I had the privilege to see a couple of weeks ago. So here we have the prototypes, if you wish, in the pre-Islamic period. Then with the next slide, will turn into, you see, slightly different shapes. And there is a continuity, of course, in the way these containers look and are shaped. But in the early Islamic period, as you can see, there's a different visual and also a different technical approach with the use of marver trails and other new other innovations in terms of what the glass market makers were doing. Next slide, please. And you can see that with time also, the shape of these small containers for essences, oils, and probably perfumes also assumed a more definite shape, a more controlled shape, if you wish. And this is probably also, you can see that it's slightly pointed at the bottom, which means that probably were created especially for transportation, for long distance transportation, to be packed in straw and being always vertical. Next, please. And during the early period, we start having clearly special productions for this type of containers. These are a series, quite a large series that survives today, of so-called cage animal flasks. But you can see that the center of it, the core of it, is a small flask that protrudes quite a lot. and is surrounded by a cage and by an animal shape. And these objects actually fit very nicely in one's hand, and you can really imagine that a few drops of the liquid could be easily poured in order to be used as perfume and as scents of some kind. So this is a very specific production of the early Islamic period until the 8th, 9th century. Let's go to the next slide, where we see more types. We can see that the shapes start to take more specific shape with these kind of globular shapes that will continue for quite a few centuries in this respect, and this kind of more triangular shape. And these are bottles or flasks that contain, that have a relatively small capacity. But if we move forward, we take the next slide. We can see also that the most common of the shapes that were established and that probably will be distributed all over the Islamic world, but also beyond the Islamic world, because they were traded very long distance on the Indian Ocean route especially. These are the so-called molar flasks because of the shape of the 4 teeth at the bottom that, as I said before, were very easy to pack, very sturdy, and would really be easy to transport. Next one. And here, just to give a general sense of what the sūq al-cattārīn, what this spice or scent market would look like, just a couple of slides to show what is today the way they look, and how you can really feel that in the early period. They would look alike, very colorful, and with a lot of branding to it as well. Next slide. I think there's another one in which we can see really today's in the Gulf, in Oman, and in Egypt, how these souks, how these shops look. Next slide, please. So one of the things that I wanted to start introducing, because rose, of course, rose scents, rose oils, and rose water probably constitute the most important part of the production of scents and perfumes in the Islamic world. I just wanted to focus for the rest of the talk on the production of rose and rose oil. Today, as I wanted to point out, one of the largest productions of rose oil and rose products is the Rose Valley of Kazanlak in Bulgaria, which obviously operated under the Ottomans in the past centuries. And this was one of the main places in which roses were introduced. But one of the things that I want to show in this slide is that even today in the production in Kazanlak, you see the 3 small wooden containers at the bottom. You can easily compare them with the shapes that already in the 7th, 8th, 9th century Islamic world they were produced in a way containing these oils and essences. Next slide, please. So if we talk about the rose, the Rosa Damascena, the Rosa Cross Damascena, the damask rose, is a hybrid of 3 different roses that developed about 7,000 years ago in the area of the modern borders of Central Asia, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and Afghanistan. Evidence for its distillation begins in about 2000 BCE. The first evidence of cultivation and use of its byproduct points to Syria, and that's why the name is the Rose of Damascus. While Rosa gallica has a good oil yield and Rosa moscata has a different profile of aroma volatiles, their hybrid offspring, the Rosa cross damascena, has the greatest number of essential oil components. It's about 300, all of which grant stronger and longer lasting scents than any other rose. Before the development of the technique of distilling rose water, rose petals were already used in Persian cuisine to perfume and flavor dishes. Next, please. So this is the production in Kazanlak in Bulgaria. And just to give you a sense of the process of creating rose oil and rose water from the petals and sepals of the Rosa cross damascena through steam distillation, this process was refined by Arab and Persian chemists in the medieval Islamic period, which led to more efficient and economic uses for perfume industries. It was Ibn Sina, or Avicenna, that described and produced the first distillation of essential rose oil, known as attar, as I mentioned before, by using an alembic, and you can see that there is one alembic in the exhibition as well, in the 10th century of our era. And he wrote, Ibn Sina wrote, because of its exquisite fragrance, the rose addresses the soul. And references to the alembic used to distill rose water appeared as early as the 10th century in an Arabic translation of the 1st century Greek physician Pedanius Dioscorides' De Materia Medica, suggesting that rose water was also produced in the Arab regions of the Middle East. The steam distillation process was later used by Al-Dimashqi in the 13th, 14th century to produce rose water on a large scale. And rose perfumes are made from rose oil or attar, a mixture of volatile essential oils obtained by steam distilling the crushed petals of roses. Rose water is a byproduct of rose oil for use in perfume. It's a flavored water obtained as the hydrosol, which is the herbal distillate portion of the rose petals. Rose water is used to flavor food, as a component in some cosmetic and medical preparations, and for religious purposes in the Islamic world. It probably originated in Persia, in modern Iran, where it is known as gul ab, which is literally rose water. Next. Rose oil is distilled today in Kazanlak, Bulgaria, this area being the largest provider of rose oil in the world. The oil-producing rose of Kazanlak is one of the most widely recognized national symbols, and there is also a rose museum there since 1969. This type of distillation gives the product greater longevity and aromatic intensity, but a smaller volume, making it ideal for transportation. The process involves large alembics, which are these big copper cauldrons that you see in the slide, through which steam gets pushed through large amount of rose petals, the scented steam that condenses and drips into a rose water vat. It still takes about 300 kilos of damask rose petals to make 1 kilo of rose oil. Next. The rose is not only cultivated in Kazanlak, but there are other areas in the Islamic world. One I'm quite familiar with because I spent time in Saudi Arabia is in Taif, which is not too far from Mecca, actually. And here they use a variant of the Rosa damascena, which has 30 petals, so it's called Reginti petala. And it's known as the Rose of Taif, the Ward Taifi. The flower's unique positioning in the mountains means that the rose is strikingly fresh due to the high altitude and cooler temperature. It has an intense but soft, powdery rose scent with hints of tea and honey. Taif is known as the city of roses and is home to nearly 1,000 rose farms stretching from different regions, but very close to Taif, with approximately 300 million blooms every year. And similarly to the Kazanlak rose, it may have been brought to Saudi Arabia by the Ottoman Turks, of course, even though other traditions say that it was coming from Iran, from Shiraz or Kashan, or even from India. So this is what you see on the left. On the right-hand side, it's a much smaller production today, and unfortunately quite stopped for some time in Syria, in the production of the damask rose near the village of Al-Mirah, near Damascus, has fallen to an all-time low since farmers are kept away from their rose fields. Some Syrians have carried their plants to the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon, and Syrian refugees also harvest the flowers in Cyprus. So there are branches of this now. And to help rejuvenate the industry, the craftsmanship associated with the Damascene rose was inscribed on the representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity by UNESCO in 2019. And so today, the knowledge of producing essential oils in this traditional way in Damascus is now in the hands of a very small group of farmers. Next, please. So now let's try to look at, now talking about rose water and rose essences, let's look at the objects that in the Islamic world these may have been used as containers. So here you can see these flasks are quite small, sturdy, and compact. But then, with the next slide, we start having more elongated necks with a kind of pinprick opening in order to be able to pour small quantities. And these perfume sprinklers become a little bit bigger in size, but always they are not absolutely globular, but one of the sides is slightly smaller than the diameter, so they are a bit pushed in. These objects are usually called kumkums in the tradition, but also in the scholarly literature. Kumkum is a bit of it's an interesting word actually, originally coming from the Aramaic, and it developed through Greek and Latin, and it's not really very much used today in the Arab world. It's more used in the Persian world as kumkum. But one thing that also is interesting to me is that in the Venetian dialect, which is where I come from, the kogoma is actually associated to coffee rather than rose, and it's basically a coffee pot. And this shape, with the next slide, as you can see, developed in either slightly bigger objects, this kind of kumkum, and this is one in the exhibition. We can take a look at the next slide. And these, most likely, that we can see 3 different rose water sprinklers in the exhibition, including the Islamic one. These developed into larger bottles with a long neck through which the liquid could be poured. Let's go to the next slide and try to see some of these shapes as they developed. Most likely, originally, rosewater sprinklers were metal, and glass was used quite soon in order to create beautiful objects that were introduced in the houses and in different moments. So in the next couple of slides, I wanted to show through the shapes of these Islamic glass bottles how this use of rose water had an impact in the socio and socioeconomic history of Islam. So rose water evolved in the Islamic cultural sphere, and Persian rose water from Fars, from southern Iran, was used both in secular and religious occasions. After the distillation technique used to produce it was improved and described by Islamic scholars in the 9th century, the first rosewater sprinklers made of metal, ceramic, or glass appeared. Their use was mentioned in the Shahnameh, the Book of Kings, in around the year 1000, describing the festivities of various mythical Persian kings. Like incense, rosewater was also used when guests were received, their hands sprinkled with the perfumed water, and as a sign that the visit was coming to an end. Next. In addition to its many gastronomic uses, rosewater presented in a sprinkler such as these ones was linked to specific stages of a meal. Thus, when the host and his guests had finished eating, they would wash their hands and mouth with salt water, scented with different substances, but invariably also with rosewater. And after moving from the dining area to couches, the guests and their host would be passed ewers or sprinklers like this, containing rosewater, which they would spray over their clothes and face. Alternatively, servants passed among the assembled guests, sprinkling them with refreshing rosewater. Next. Other practices include sprinkling rosewater on the shrouds of the dead. For such purposes, long-necked sprinklers, like these ones, would have been employed, whereas differently shaped containers held the precious attar of rose. Next. And just to give you a sense of economic, social, and religious importance of rosewater and the significant demand and offer can be understood by a few direct historical references. For example, from the substantial quantities of rosewater that must have been required for the perfuming of the Dome of the Rock, this is a big building in Jerusalem, carried out by Salah ad-Din's nephew, Al-Malik al-Mu'azzam Isa, after the reconquest of Jerusalem in 1187. And even more tells you about the importance of rosewater is that every year, 30,000 bottles of rosewater, the province of Syria was required to give as an annual tribute to the Abbasid Caliph of Baghdad, as reported by Ibn Khaldun in the 12th century of our year. Next. Just to finish with a couple of additional slides, to bring us to a more contemporary, look of these perfume and rosewater sprinklers, I just wanted to show you a few of the Indian produced or British produced for export to India objects that you can see here. And in the next one, I wanted to show you a few, next slide, please. I wanted to show you in the Ottoman world, the type of rosewater sprinkler that they were using, always as paired with incense burners, because incense and rosewater were used at the same time as symbols of hospitality in large gatherings and celebrations. Next. And to finish with these are kind of funny sprinklers, and we are not even absolutely sure that they were used as sprinklers. This type of bottle was used according to folklore. They are called ashkdan, and they were containers for tears, theoretical for wives that were separated from their husbands when they had to go to war or away for long periods. But from the shape also of the opening, it is likely that were used also as rosewater sprinklers. And so that's what I wanted to finish with. There's another slide in which I just wanted to point out that in the past 10, 15 years, some interest has been given to this area of study in the Islamic world. There was an article published in 2012 by Sheila Kemby on incense burners and perfume containers in the Islamic world, and there have been two exhibitions. One is the David Collection in Copenhagen in 2015, and much more recently, an exhibition organized by the Institut du Monde Arabe in Paris, which was there last year and the beginning of this year, and has recently closed in the National Museum of Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. So thank you very much, and I'm very happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was information packed. I really learned a lot. I was thinking
Try.
about those swan neck bottles and the connection with this sort of tear shape and that sort of Victorian notion about the ancient bottles of like the tear bottles, but of course they're perfume bottles, we now know. So it's this interesting kind of connection there. Just a reminder to put questions in the Q&A, makes it easiest for us to look at them. You can access the Q&A through your Zoom screen at the bottom there. And if you have any questions for our speaker this morning. So one question that came through is, how were they filled given the small necks? Do we have any sense?
Well, that's a good question. I'm sure that there were funnels through which it was possible to fill them. And in some cases, you know, as I don't know, maybe Julie can intervene here. In earlier periods, you can see that they might have broken and then reclosed the neck. But this is not the case with the long neck bottles in the Islamic world. They must have had a way with a very, very narrow funnel to be able to pour the water into these pinprick openings.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Do we know where the rose, you talked about Damascus as being a location that rose water would have been produced in the sort of Abbasid period, the high medieval Islamic period. Are there any other locations, or would it have been sort of an exclusive production in Syria?
No, probably it was produced, well, in Iran, for sure. It was produced in the cities of Kashan, cities of Shiraz, especially. We know only, obviously, in recent times that they established it in Taif, that in Damascus probably there's been long continuity, and about 300 years ago also in this area of Bulgaria that was under the Ottoman rule. But we probably don't know what happened in many other regions. We don't have enough information. But if you think that the rose was cultivated already in 2000 BC, it's clear that when they started to be able to distill it and to create rose water and attar in many areas of the Middle East, they would be able to cultivate the rose.
Great, thank you. What about the dating of the bottles? About how is that conducted, so that we can think about these sort of sequences of production and the kind of evolution of this form over time? What is the dating of these types based on?
Well, I think that it's a bit complicated in dating Islamic glass properly, because we don't have much information, we don't have signatures, we don't have dates. But I think that by now we have a fairly good understanding of the evolution of Islamic glass in different areas. When I was working on the catalog of glass from the collection of the National Museum of Kuwait, I made an effort to try to create a small history of Islamic glass. And I think that by using all our tools, which is obviously art historical tools, visual references, but also technical and technological references and scientific references, I think that we can start creating a good history, a good evolution of these shapes and colors and patterns. And they will never be absolutely perfect. There will be always 12th, 13th century, 11th, 12th century, but definitely we should be able. I think that we are in good shape. What I was putting in the captions there, I don't think that they can be questioned or challenged to great lengths. Yeah.
Thank you. Were there ever any other scents that were added to these containers either mixed with the rose oil or rose essences to make a little bit more elaborate scent, or were they exclusively rose?
No, we don't know. Actually,
Yeah.
we imagined that they were rose because we don't know. We don't have any left that have the content of this in order to ensure that we are no, that we tell exactly what it was. But yes, the production of perfumed waters and perfumed oils was very widespread in the Islamic world, and so they could be used for many different scents, of course. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And do we know who would have used these containers? Is it just sort of elite courtly individuals, or is there a lower
I don't believe
echelon?
So.
Yeah.
I believe so. I mean, in courtly gatherings, of course, they would have the silver rose sprinklers, rose water sprinklers, and they would be very elaborate. There would be sets and all this. But as I said, these are all objects, especially the glass ones, that were available most likely in the market, and so. Using rose water was really very common, not only in food, but also to spray it on your body, on your clothes. And so I'm pretty sure that the simpler ones were very affordable as well. And probably it was more expensive, the rose water itself, than the container.
Mm. So were the containers reusable, or did you buy it, do we know, like with the material in it or with the rose water in it? Are they refillable? There's a lot of, anybody who's paying attention to the chat, there's a lot of speculation in the chat about how these materials might have been filled and sealed. So I think we need some experimental work done here. But is it something that you have your container and you take it to be refilled, or do you purchase it with the contents?
I mean, obviously, we don't know because there is no reference, but I would expect that if you have a nice rose water container made in glass that you like to have in your house, once you bought it with the rose water inside and you finish it, you would go back to a place where they can fill it again, and you certainly would reuse it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Thank you. All right, I think we've got about time for one more question. Would the small containers have been perhaps carried with the individual and sort of held up to the nose to kind of drive off, bad scents, or were they more this sort of ceremonial context and usage?
No, I think I mean the larger ones for the ones that were at least half a liter, a quarter of a liter, they would be used in the homes, of course, so they weren't portable. But the very small ones, like today's very small perfume bottles or scent bottles, I'm sure that they would carry them with them as well and use them when they needed to.
Yeah. Okay, I said that was the last one, but I got one more, and then we'll move on to our next speaker. Is there a way to distinguish between the rosewater vessels and the coal vessels?
And the what? The coal
vessels. The coal vessels? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, rose water obviously is a liquid, and you have to extract quite a little bit of it in order to use it. A coal is not a liquid. Coal is something that you need a very small container, usually a vial, in order to be able to go in with a little spoon and extract it and then use it as coal. So definitely all the objects that I showed today, they were liquid containers and not coal containers.
Mm-hmm. So you're thinking about things like the size of the opening and the way the contents are held. Yeah. Great. Definitely. Well, thank you so much. This was really, really informative, and I'll certainly think about many of those objects a little bit more richly than I have before. So
my pleasure. Thank you so much, Kate. Yeah.
Thank you for staying up late with us. So
yeah, but I'll listen to Adam's presentation now.
Oh, great.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Thank you.